Welcome everyone to the Lawyers Committee and the Truth Action Project program. Today's program is called Recognizing and Pushing Back the Post 9/11 Police State. Our next speaker is Barbara Honegger. Barbara Honegger M.S. has served as the White House Policy Analyst and Special Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy, Director of the Attorney General's Law Review at the Department of Justice, and for more than a decade was the Senior Military Affairs Journalist at the Naval Postgraduate School, the premier Science, Technology, and National Security Affairs Graduate Research University of the Department of Defense. Barbara will be speaking on anthrax attacks, open back door to 9/11. Barbara, take it away.
The title of my presentation is The Anthrax Attacks, Open Back Door, Wide Open Back Door, in fact, to 9/11 Truth and Justice. In fact, I like to say that the true facts about the anthrax attacks are in fact the holy grail of 9/11 Truth and Justice itself as well. Trying to get my slide to go down. There we go. I'm honored to be part of this historic conference, and also it is a great honor to be part of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. I'm on the board and officer and have been a member of this incredible anthrax attacks subcommittee. It's been a lot of work, but we made it to this day. I'd just like to say that the Lawyers Committee is one of those amazing organizations that, like Margaret Mead's famous quote, where she said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." And the Lawyers Committee is definitely one of those organizations. And that was really brought home yesterday in the Architects and Engineers online conference, Richard Gage's conference. There was a wonderful segment with our beloved David Ray Griffin, the Dean of the 9/11 Truth Movement. And at the very end, Richard Gage asked David Ray Griffin, "What gives you hope after 19 years? And his answer was the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. And that was his only answer. So that is a tremendous responsibility that we have on our shoulders, and we are honored to be able to fulfill that responsibility. The Lawyers Committee doesn't just make a difference. I believe it will make the difference. And we're going to see, we've seen in this conference here today, and also in the rest of it, including my presentation, why that is the case. Now, 9/11 truth matters because truth matters. It is impossible to have justice without truth, and impossible to have peace without justice. Now, the real perpetrators of 9/11 and the anthrax attacks and other false flags, our real challenge is, as Ray McGovern, our true eminence Griff, yeah, maybe I'm mispronouncing that, but he sure looks the role right now. They do not want peace. I mean, that's the bottom line. For them, peace is the enemy, which is why they go to such extreme lengths to lie and bury the truth about 9/11, the anthrax attacks, and everything else that really matters. Now, of course, one man more than any other in modern history knew and acted on this, and that was Mahatma Gandhi. And many people don't know that he began his famous Satyagraha movement, which means uniting truth with power or efficacy or force. He actually began that by a wonderful synchronicity on September 11th, just after the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century. Gandhi's goal and ours is therefore political, and it is also revolutionary. And to prove that to you, I'm going to read quickly before I get into the meat of my presentation, this quote from Patrick Henry, who arguably was perhaps the most important, certainly one of the most important individuals that led to the United States of America and our American Revolution. Quote, "For my part, whatever anguish of spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst of the truth, and to provide for it and act upon it." So 9/11 truth matters immensely. The horrendous consequences of the September 11th attacks and the anthrax attacks, as we will see and have seen, and the official lies about them are well known by the members of the 9/11 Truth Movement to have resulted in horrendous consequences. not only the 3,000 deaths on 9/11 were nothing compared to the literal millions of deaths and displacements, literal tens of millions of displacements, and at least 1 million deaths, if not more, from the 9/11 lie. So what is needed is a holy grail. And in fact, the 9/11 Truth Movement is, in effect, in my opinion, a search for the holy grail of 9/11 truth. And I've actually made it my mission over the last 19 years to identify what I call the holy grails of 9/11 truth. The first one is the 9/11 war games and counterterrorism exercises, which you will see are going to be incredibly important for the link between the anthrax attacks and 9/11 itself here in a moment. And as many of us know, there were so-called emergency response or counterterrorism response exercises and or war games going on the morning of 9/11 itself that mirrored a great part of the actual attacks on that morning. And that is not a coincidence. So there are other, what I call holy grails of 9/11 truth. The deep basement explosions inside both World Trade Centers 1 and 2 on 9/11 before a plane hit either tower. 14 seconds before a plane hit World Trade Center 1, 17 seconds between a plane hit World Trade Center 2, massive deep basement explosions. And by Logic 101, any kindergartner knows that the official story of a plane impact causing all of that and the collapse of the towers cannot be true. The third one, of course, is World Trade Center 7, the famous 3 buildings, 2 planes. The fourth one is the pre-plane approach at the Pentagon of massive inside the building explosions at 9:30, when the official story says a plane didn't even approach the building for almost 8 minutes later. And as you're going to see now in the meat of my presentation, the fifth and in my opinion most important holy grail of 9/11 truth, not just anthrax truth, is the anthrax attacks. And what's important about those are the multiple links of anthrax reports, warnings of anthrax, counteractions against anthrax on the day of 9/11 itself. Now, I have been focused on this, what I call the most important 9/11 truth holy grail for over a decade. I first published these links in Op-Ed News in 2008, and I highly recommend that everyone watching this read that article. It's still online at opednews.com. And the way to find the link is to go to 9/11 Freefall, the radio program that's sponsored by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I was recently interviewed there by Andy Steele, who's the host of that program. And if you just go there recently, you'll find the link to the audio of that interview. But scroll down a little bit and you will get to the link to my article from 2008 called Links of Anthrax to 9/11. You simply need to know all of them. I'm going to go into a few of the most important ones here. Now, the most well-known link to anthrax on the day of 9/11 itself, of course, many of us in the movement and beyond the movement know that that is Jerome Hauer, who had been the head of security for the World Trade Center. And most people don't know, even in the movement, was an expert on building collapses. In fact, he's been referred to by the New York Times, I believe, as I recall correctly, obsessed with building collapses and the effects of building collapses and the responses to building collapses, not coincidentally, for 9/11. And it was Jerome Hauer who personally put the Bush-Cheney White House on anti-anthrax Cipro on 9/11. Not after the letters were mailed, not after the letters were received, not after the public knew about the letters, but on 9/11. And we know from William Patrick III, who was known as the father of the US biowarfare program. William Patrick has told us on Frontline, on PBS Frontline, that if you get anthrax, inhalation anthrax, you must go on antibiotics in the first 24 hours immediately, or it can lead to death, which rules out that Jerome Hauer put the White House personnel on anti-anthrax Cipro on 9/11 itself. It rules out that that was because of the fear of a future anthrax attack. All right, but there are many other links to 9/11 itself, to anthrax warnings, threats, and counteractions. I'm just going to mention a couple of them in my 2008 article. one of the most important to me because we have the audio tape of him saying this, is an eyewitness. And in the New York Oral History Project, which is a public audio testimony, you can hear it online. Ground Zero resident Bruno Dellinger reported that on the morning of 9/11, he was pulled into a bank building by an FBI agent, had a big FBI in gold letters on the back of his jacket. And as they together looked out of the large clear plate glass window at the pyroclastic cloud from the collapse of World Trade Center to barreling down the street past that door, the FBI agent said to him, "We knew," meaning the FBI, "we knew that this was coming down and that it would involve anthrax." And he told him to immediately, as soon as he could, go to a hospital and get checked for anthrax because, quote, "you never know what was in those planes," unquote. Also, as many of us know in the movement, Graham McQueen has detailed in his wonderful book, The Anthrax Attacks Deception, between 9/11 and the very first anthrax attack letter being received, let alone mailed, let alone postmarked, high-level government and media elites began taking anti-anthrax Cipro. In fact, there was a run on it. But the most important link of anthrax or anthrax warnings, threats, and counter-response is what is known as the Tripod 2 counterterrorism exercise that was being prepared in the very same weeks and months leading up to 9/11 that the controlled demolition explosives and incendiaries were being planted throughout the towers in World Trade Center 7. Now I'm going to quickly get across here why this exercise is so important with a series of what ifs. What if, just like there were war games and counterterrorism exercises on hijack, and even with the National Reconnaissance Office on the morning of 9/11, even a scenario exercise on a plane crashing into one of its corner towers. What if there were, on the morning of 9/11 itself, there were links to anthrax? What if, in a high-level federal government FEMA New York City counterterrorism exercise just happened to be planned for the next day, September 12th, for which FEMA and other personnel were already in New York City on September 10th, the day before the attacks? What if the scenario for that exercise was an anthrax attack? Maybe one even using letters mailed to members of the mainstream media in New York City, which then happened in October. And what if the weeks or months prior to 9/11 that this exercise was being planned, as I just said, that the equipment and personnel for it were identified and practiced were those same weeks and months that explosives were being planted in the World Trade Center towers 1, 2, and 7? What if the command center for this anthrax attacks counterterrorism exercise was on a pier not far from Ground Zero? And what if all the critical functions of the World Trade Center's own Emergency Operations Center of Mayor Giuliani were then able to just coincidentally and miraculously be set up in what was to have been the command center for that very Tripod 2 bioterrorism exercise on that very pier after World Trade Center just happened to collapse in a classic controlled demolition on 9/11. Now, these aren't what ifs, they are real and they happened. And they are the holy grail of both the anthrax attacks and 9/11, because any direct links between the anthrax attacks that the government itself insists was an inside job and 9/11, which, remember, our government is now desperate that the American people not also know was an inside job. By Logic 101, therefore, 9/11 itself had to have been an inside job, and we have effectively gotten the government to admit it. So that's why it is so critically important that the Lawyers Committee anthrax petition, not only the one to Congress, which we are imminently about to file there electronically, but also the much longer and more detailed petition to the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia that will be submitted in mid-October, coming up just in a few weeks. Why those two petitions, and they're related, of course, much of the same content, that those two petitions are so critically important, not just for the anthrax attacks truth, but for 9/11 truth itself. So I hope that I have now convinced you that the true facts about anthrax and the anthrax attacks and their links to 9/11 itself could well be the holy grail of 9/11 truth. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you very much.